Hello and welcome to Adventures in One Love. This is the first video in a three-part series where Alex Rodriguez and Lydia King, the founder of One Love Ministries, sit down and talk about how Alex became a teacher and entrepreneur and the journey that took her to Wuhan, China, the place where COVID-19 all started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's get to the interview.
Alex, I'm so glad to be talking to you.
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that you asked me to be here.
Well, I personally love just talking to you, but I'm really glad that everyone is going to get an opportunity to hear your story, what you've been learning in this season. But tell everyone a little bit about your professional self.
Okay, so I guess I'm a teacher by nature, by trade. That is my certification and degree. I have a degree in elementary education and special education, educational therapy. So long story short, I'm a teacher. How that has played out in my life is not the typical teacher story, whereas I don't currently work at a school in the traditional sense, but I was working at a school before elementary school.
Well, I love that. That's kind of where we're going to start today, because you were a second grade teacher. We both actually taught at the same school, but not at the same time.
Right. I came after you left.
I know, sadness. But I get to work with you all the time now, so it's worth it. It's
True.
okay.
It's okay.
But I wanted to kind of share, you've had a really interesting journey. We're going to talk about some experiences that you've had, some really cool travel experiences that you've had. But I wanted people to get it to kind of know the framework and what God was doing in your life. And so can we start when you were teaching? You were teaching second grade.
Yes. Actually, I was teaching first grade.
Oh, my bad.
So, yes, the journey to become a teacher at the school where we were teaching was a very interesting one. I started right out of college. It was really rocky. I ended up quitting my first teaching job 2 months out. I did not like it at all. I ended up getting a job at a hotel where I was an administrative assistant for a while, and then I worked at summer camps, and I was just kind of bouncing around because I had had such a bad experience initially with teaching. Teaching is really stressful, which I know you know, but listeners who don't know,
Girl,
it is something else. So,
I taught for 3 years after like corporate sales.
yeah.
And I was like, teaching is the hardest job I've ever had in my life.
So I struggled with that calling initially. And throughout this whole time, even in college, I felt like I was called to start some kind of business. And I knew the more I spent time with the Lord, the more clear that became, that the more, I knew it was going to be an educational company. I knew it was going to be something to do with hospitalized and homebound kids, and I wasn't sure how that played out. So as I was going through my weird journey, which eventually brought me back to working for the church, which was connected to the school, and then I got connected to the school, and the Lord called me back to teaching. Throughout that, in the background, I was still praying about starting this company, whatever that was.
In all fairness, you're an educator, but you have the entrepreneurial spirit. You are an entrepreneur.
Right.
And so that's something that you can't really ignore when that's in you.
Right. And I always thought it was because, my parents have their own business, and I grew up around that. So I know what it's like to start a business, to run one, all the ins and outs. So I just figured, well, that's part of who I am too. So I was teaching first grade, and one of my biggest prayers, the more I taught and the longer that I just in that season, I was teaching for 2 years, and I just felt the more I was around these students, the more I felt the Lord calling me to start this, and the more clear my business became in my head. But I didn't have a name for it, and that was my biggest thing. I said, Lord, when you give me a name for whatever this thing is, that's my green light to quit this day job and to start it.
I love that you said that. I want to kind of make sure we don't miss that. You ask the Lord, when you give me a name, then I will take this seriously. And
right.
I'll take the leap of faith.
Right. And I had written out the business, what it was going to be. Every time I had an idea, I had written it down, so it was there. But I didn't feel like I had the okay yet.
So it's almost like the Gideon fleece. You're laying it out, and you're like, Lord, if it's wet, then I'll go. So the name. So how did that transpire? Because you're teaching, And then you have this, so you've done background work. And I think that's also really important to hear, that there's a lot of things that are happening in little bite-sized pieces, building something that you don't even know if this is real or what this is.
Right. And I knew in my spirit, and people had already spoken it over me, like whatever
Awesome.
the Lord is giving you, it's going to come to fruition.
Awesome.
But my thing is always wait for his timing, because that's key. I've found
It's key, but it's the hardest part.
it's key. And it's also, for me, I was also timid and afraid. So I was like, I'm going to be scared, but I know that if it's God's right timing, I can work through that fear, because it's going to be good. It's going to be okay. So
we know he gives you the name.
right. So it was during a youth conference. It wasn't even at the youth conference. It was the second day of the conference. I wake up and I'm getting ready to go to this first session, and I just hear the name in my spirit. And it was in the middle of the school year, and I was praying about whether to sign my contract for the third year, my teaching contract at the school that I was at. So I actually had that contract. I taped it to my mirror, and I was praying about it. So I was like, Lord, if you don't give me a name, I'm going to sign it, and it's due in a couple weeks, and I need to turn it in.
Yeah.
So tell me. So I felt the name drop in my spirit, and I was like, okay. So then I checked, no, I'm not coming back next year, and I signed it. And the next week I went to my principal and I gave it to him, which was really hard, because
I was going to say, yeah, that's tough.
It was tough, but it was also kind of easy, because I knew the Lord was in it.
Amen.
And that's where that happened. So
okay, so what is the name of this amazing
it's
venture?
called Bedside Educators Network, because it's tutors and educators that essentially come to the bedside of children who are hospitalized, homebound, can't go to school for whatever reason, and they will come and literally teach at the bedside of their students / patients.
So
BEN, Ben.
Ben for
I
short.
call it Ben. Ben is my child.
Yeah.
Essentially. So yeah.
So you get the name, you know you're not going back to teach.
Right. And then so I remember my contract and salary and paycheck was all set up for July of, the end of that school year. And then I'm like, okay, July 30th, I have no source of income. I had moved out of my parents' house a year before, so I was, living with roommates. I had to pay rent. I had bills. I was grown, but I had no income source.
Yeah.
And I knew that eventually, I also wasn't naive to think that I would start my business and I would start living off of it immediately. I knew it was going to take time to build. So I said, the way that we talked to God, I was like, God, if you led me here, you're going to provide.
Yeah.
And that's when this really crazy, awesome opportunity happened. I was on Facebook and I saw this ad for a Chinese tutoring company. And it looked like a total scam. I was like, it said, make this much money teaching from home in your pajamas. I was like, that's not real.
Yeah.
So I kept scrolling and I just kept seeing it. So then I went on YouTube and I was like, I looked up VIP Kid, is this real? And the first video that came up was this young woman who's a traveler. She travels the world, and it was entitled, I think, How I Make Money and Travel the World with VIP Kid. And I said, well, I love traveling. You and I have gone on some trips together.
We have.
And I was like, well, that sounds like fun. Let's look at it. And the more I did research, the more I was like, okay, this is a legitimate company. And this seems like a job that I can do while still working on what I think the Lord is calling me to. So I took a leap of faith and I applied for this company, jumped through a million hoops to get the job.
Yeah.
And then I was hired and I started, that became my income source for a long time.
So prayer answered.
Exactly. And looking back, I realized that
Huge.
even then was just divine
Yep.
provision, because I had no idea where I would be in 2 years, that I would be meeting face to face some of the students that I was seeing on screen. That wasn't even in my heart at all.
Yep.
Traveling.
So 2 years. I love that you
Yeah.
kind of put that in perspective. So you're teaching, you take the leap of faith, you're kind of investing in your own entrepreneurial venture that the Lord has given to you. You know that this is something you're supposed to do.
Right.
Then VIP Kid comes into your life and you're intentionally just tutoring children in China.
Yes.
And so now China becomes a part of your life because you being a natural educator, I think I think the way that we know as teachers how to be effective is to really love your students and to know them. And so you got to know these students.
Right. And the platform is very interesting because you might teach one student and then never see them again. And then if the student likes you, then the parent continues to book you, and you get what are called regulars, or kids who are regularly booking your open tutoring time slots. So I got a good handful of these regular students, and I started really getting to know them. I really, they're super cute, really sweet. They would show me the things in their house, show me their pets and all kinds of stuff. But that was the extent of my involvement with them. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was it. And that kind of introduced a season of really, I became the queen of like the side hustle, because I was doing VIP Kid, but it was just enough to cover my bills. And I was like, okay, I'm not really actually putting anything away for savings. I'm not, I'm paying my bills, but I'm also trying to start this company. So I started also tutoring after school, and I started virtually tutoring, and I basically was taking anything on. I also started doing photography. I was just almost taking any job on, just so that I cannot, support myself. So I can support myself through this season until the business took off. And then came the big launch, which you were a part of, because you are on my board for bedside educators. And that was a really interesting season because I launched, and that was in September. I remember the day, I think it was September 5th.
It was a big moment.
It was a big moment. I held an open house. I booked a little conference room.
It was super legit.
It was. I had all my board members there, and we conducted interviews. Yep. We did a whole thing. I think like 4 people ended up showing up, which was small, but it was also a big deal. We had bagels. We had everything. It was great. Yeah. And then it was so strange because I was ready to take off, and like we launched, and then in my head, it just kind of fell off. For some reason, I had all these applicants, and I had no idea what to do with them next. Yeah. I didn't know how to connect them with students. For some reason, it felt like my ideas were drying up. And then with that, the finances were also drying up. I had a student I had been virtually tutoring her for the good part of a year, and they were giving me a lot of income. And then her mom called me one day and said, okay, we have to stop this. And my income essentially dried up. And then VIP Kid also slowed down. So I was like, Lord, what is this? Yeah. And in that, I felt like he was just moving me in a different direction. So,
well, it's almost, I mean, I'm the outside looking in, and because I do have such an intimate bird's eye view into your life, I could see that it was, okay, that part of the preparation is complete. Now let's go into another area we need to focus on.
Right. But to me, it didn't make sense because I had just launched my business. Yeah. I was like, this is the launch. And I felt like it was like launched into the ocean because it didn't go where I thought. And obviously emotionally dealing with that was interesting. Yeah. But I knew that the Lord was up to something else. It didn't make sense to me, though.
I just want whoever's listening to this to know, though, you were walking in obedience. It wasn't like you were, the Lord said go left, and you were like, nah, I think I'll go right. Like, you were really walking this out. And he brought you to that, what you feel like was a dry place.
Yes. I felt like he was asking me to go back to the classroom. And it was mid-year. The school year had already started. It was after... It was like Thanksgiving-ish that time. So I was like, okay, God, what are you doing? If things are drying up, that means you have something else for me. So I started looking for that. Not looking for another job, but just kind of opening my ears and talking to certain people, telling them what was going on in my life. Yeah. Just asking for prayer and support. And then I'll never forget, I was still tutoring at the time at the school that I had been previously working. And one of my old colleagues came up to me. I told her what was going on, and she said, well, we're looking for a second grade teacher. The one we had just quit. And I was like, oh, haha, that's funny. Walked away, didn't think of that, but it just stayed in my heart and it stayed in my spirit. And after praying for that, I sent an email to the principal saying, hey, I heard that this is the situation. Can I help? And he was like, are you serious? We actually wanted to contact you because we thought you'd be good, but we knew that you were. He was great because he said, we knew that you were starting your own business and we wanted to be respectful of that.
That's awesome.
So the fact that I reached out to them was a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
So took that job mid-year, I want to say this nicely, the most behaviorally challenged class I have ever had. They had, I believe this is the third teacher that quit on them.
Wow.
Not in that year, but since the first grade. This group
Yeah.
had a history of just not a good track record.
Look at, I'm like, Dito, that's so sad.
Yeah, it's really sad, but after 2 days,
it's sad.
saw
But
why.
then the Lord said, I'm going to send Alex.
Yes.
And you did a great job with this group.
And in a way, it was redemption for me because my very first teaching job, I started mid-year and I quit after 2 months.
Oh,
and
wow.
that had always kind of hung over me because it was not a good teaching situation. Going back, I would make the same decision again. It was just a very, very unhealthy situation, especially for my first job. But I still kind of felt a little bit of failure from that. And so going in
And see,
mid-year,
God knows those things. He knows where those things are that we need that healing to take place before I can really move.
Right.
forward.
In my head, I would look back on that as one of my biggest failures. Like, I didn't stick it out for those kids that needed me then. But then I came in mid-year.
Double for your trouble.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. This class was something else. I mean, we had a reputation. They had a reputation before I came. I would be in conversations. I remember teachers' lounge, they would come and they would vent a little bit about, oh, I'm really having this behavior issue. And I would walk in and they would be quiet. And they were like, but my kids aren't as bad as her kids. And but what's funny is, like, I don't know. I think I got understanding. Everybody kind of understood the situation. But I was super blessed and I was able to finish out the school year
It's awesome.
with those kids.
And you did make a huge difference.
I
So
hope I
I love
did.
you that you use the word redemption because, I mean, the kids still love you. You had a lot of positive. I mean, even like I said, I wasn't even teaching at the time, and I heard about the impact that you had,
Oh, that's
and
good.
so
I didn't
it
know
was an
that.
awesome impact.
Very cool.
Yes.
See, and I still talk to those kids. I still see them in the hallways at church. They still hug me. They're my kids.
Yeah,
You
and
know.
so, but that took you. So it kind of helped patch that area need for healing.
Right. But with that came a huge opportunity.
Okay.
Which is where our story is going to launch. So I was sitting there, I want to say it was after my first month, I get an email saying, okay, we are getting ready to host our foreign students in our
Oh
class.
yeah. I
Yeah.
did that a couple of times.
Yes. So
I
our
loved
class, our school is connected with schools in China. And so what our school does is when China when they have their holiday, a group of them will come to our school and just see what that is, see what it is in an American school.
it. Yeah. They get
and
the
I
full
had done
American
that.
experience.
Right. And I had done that before. Where I just had a Chinese student come and sit in my class. And the language barrier is pretty strong. They're very, very young at that point, and
Yeah.
they're not fluent in English whatsoever.
I think 12 years old was like maybe the mid-age
Well, I
range?
mean, I had first graders.
Oh, wow.
I remember when I had taught first grade before, I had first grade students come and sit in my class. And, you include them as much as possible, as much as they can be. But it's really fun, So in that, I got a separate little gem in my email saying, oh, by the way, your student who is assigned to your class this time around, their mom works in education. So she will be also auditing your class, which for me, I'm like, okay, I literally have the worst behaved kids in the whole school. Why would you put this poor mother in my
exactly.
class?
This is not going to represent the school well.
Yeah, I was like, you really, are you sure? You sure you want to? Okay. All right.
But God knows.
God knew. So she was so sweet. Her English was really good. And I met her and her son. And after the 2 weeks, she came and she kind of pulled me aside and she's like, oh, do you know why I was observing you? I said, you're a teacher, right? She's like, no, actually, I work for a university in China. And I'm the head of this international teaching department. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then she's like, I think you'd be a really good fit for our staff. And, if you work with us it's a 1-year contract or 2-year or 3 years, whatever you want. We provide you housing and we pay for your travel. And she was saying all the magic words because,
Yeah.
I mean, I love traveling. And she's like, just think about it. And if you want to, next school year. And I said, well, what about this coming school year? Because I had no intention of returning for,
Right.
the other school year. I was just there to finish out this year.
Yep.
With the intention of when summer started, I was going to start working on Ben again and try to relaunch. But then this opportunity came. And as I prayed about it, I got a prophetic word saying you need to go. It was that weekend. She told me on a Friday. Saturday night, I went to a service. The preacher called me out and he said, I don't know what it is, but the Holy Spirit is telling you to go.
Wow.
And I was like, well, okay, I guess I'm going to China.
You hear that, you're just like, do you
And
know
my,
me?
My mom was laughing because she had come with me and she's
Wow.
just like, you said you wanted a word from God. You need to go. So I said, okay, I guess I'm going to China.
But it wasn't just a simple yes. I mean, because you had it in your heart, but there was other voices. There was other people that were speaking other things.
Yes.
So it wasn't just an easy decision. I mean, it was easy because you're like, I'm going to be obedient, and you are obedient.
Yeah.
But the other influences.
Yes. I had a person in my life who essentially said he was feeling in his spirit, and he's a believer as well.
Yeah.
And I try to respect that and honor that, but he said he didn't feel peace about it. And this isn't a person who I'm very close to, so I was taking that with a grain of salt.
But it's still enough to be like,
you don't know me. But then I was like, but I trust that you know the Lord. So,
Yeah.
so I prayed about that too. And he said that he didn't have peace, to which I responded, but I do. So bye.
and that's important, I think, for people listening, is that if you have the peace and you know what the Lord has said to you, you still have to move in that obedience. There are going to be people who try to bring confusion or
Right.
different words saying like, I feel like the Lord is doing this. I mean, that is.
And his intentions, I know his intentions were good.
Right,
I don't think that
absolutely.
he was trying to steer me wrong. I think it was genuine concern as a friend.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I don't feel comfortable with you going this way.
And in all fairness, so, we do Coffee Writers together. So Coffee Writers Cafe is something that you and I started
Yes.
kind of in the middle of that dry season with Ben, where we were like, we're supposed to be writing.
Yes.
And what am I doing? And so we're doing Coffee Writers, and you'd bring this like urgings to the group. And what you got there, everything was really encouraging.
Right. You guys as a group, Coffee Writers Cafe, was
Yes.
very encouraging. Everybody was praying for me with the notion that we'll be sad if you leave, and it was temporary. And there were projects that you and I had started,
Yep.
not just Coffee Writers, but things that we had started together that were going to have to be put on hold, as well as Ben.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of things that would have to stop in order for this trip to take place. But one of the biggest desires of my heart was to travel.
Yep.
And it still is to travel, even in this fun, crazy time.
Yeah. Yes.
So I felt like the Lord was kind of helping me to do that. And
So you say yes,
I said yes.
and then you have to go through the whole process of visas. And I remember the race to get everything in, because you were going very, very quick.
Right.
It was like, okay, once you said yes, it was like, okay, the race was on.
Yes.
Gotta
I
get
said
there.
yes in February, end of February, March. And then I was supposed to start in August, September, which to us, that's 6 months. But when you're trying to get visas and start from scratch, especially into China,
I was going to say, China's a different animal.
yes. And their laws change constantly.
Yeah.
Constantly. I mean, you could have 1 month, the visa laws are this, the next month, they're completely different. And so I was trying to fulfill all of those. But in that, I had a lot of peace. And because I said, okay, Lord, if you're calling me here, you're going to provide
He's
the
gonna do
way
it.
to do it. And I'm going to do the work. I'm not just going to wait for the visa to fall in my lap. I'll do
point.
everything I need to do. But any issues that I encounter that I have no control over, like, I have to leave that to God, because he's the one who's making it happen,
Yeah.
essentially. So,
So it's like
that was
easy,
fun.
hard.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, it's easy because God, you're doing this. So I'll do what you tell me to do when you tell me to do it, but you've got to do it.
I'll put in the work that I need to put
Yeah.
in, but I'm not going to take on something that I have no control over. And I've learned that through my years of like living.
Yeah.
If I have no control over it, I can release that because
Come on.
it's above me,
Yeah.
you know?
So you get the yes, you start the preparation, and you are leaving in August. What does the preparation before you go look like?
Well, the first step is to get your visa, which is not easy at all, because in order to get your visa, you need a letter of invitation from the country, especially if you're going for work. So there's different visas you can apply for.
So you can't just be unemployed and be like, I want to get a job in China.
No, you have to have a job beforehand. You have to have a viable job offer. The place of employment has to write to the government and tell them, we are employing this person. Here's all their information. And they they sent me a whole checklist of things that they needed from me in order for them to write that letter. And that took about 2 months to get everything together.
Yeah, that's important for perspective.
Right. And I also was super blessed in that I have a friend who was also traveling to China. He had lived there before, and he was here itinerating to go back over there. And I was like, hey, you and I didn't know him before, but we had connected through random events, not so random events at church. And I remembered, hey, I have a friend who knows about this process. So he sent me so much helpful information to speed the process along. He sent me the name of this company he uses that helps with all of that. And that was such a big, I took him to dinner out a few times, and I was like, tell me everything I need to know about China. And he was just really, really helpful. So those were just like little green lights that I got through this whole process.
So I want to be a little bit kind of practical. What did you pack? What did you bring? Like, what did that look like? You're going to China.
So international flights, it's different from domestic flights. You're allowed to bring 2 giant suitcases and then 2 carry-ons, or a carry-on and a personal item or whatever. So all of that was stuffed. I did cry trying to stuff everything because, for context, I had to move back in with my parents right before all this happened. So all of my stuff was in kind of storage in their garage. And then all of that essential stuff I had to sort through to go to China for a year.
Wow.
To a city, Wuhan.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, is it hot? Is it cold? What do I need to prepare? And they go through all 4 seasons there. They have snow. Their summers feel like Florida summers. Their winters feel like New York winters. So it's all 4 seasons. And I'm a Florida girl. I literally only have shorts and flip-flops.
Yeah, we have 1 season here. Yeah.
So I was trying to prepare, and I was just, I don't know. There were definitely tears shed as I was trying to pack everything, knowing that they wouldn't have certain things. They didn't have Café Bustelo, so I tried to pack 5 bricks of it with me, and I couldn't fit them. So I cried because I could only bring 2 bricks of Bustelo with me. That's real. I was trying to decide what shoes I was going to bring and scarves.
I mean, it's a year. It's a year in a country that's essentially kind of closed off and very particular. And so you were the teacher in you, the educator, the traveler, all of those what you think are random things came together to really help you be the most prepared.
It was super helpful.
Well, I'm so glad that we really have a perspective of what brought you here. I really want the people that are listening to understand that it wasn't just, hey, I'm going to China, let's go. Like the Lord kind of brought you like almost breadcrumbs to this point. And you had quite the adventure in Wuhan. And so I'm excited that we're going to get to talk about that. I want people to understand what it was like to move there. So we'll tell them a little bit about that, but then also what kind of ensued. We all know that COVID-19 broke out, and it's happened to start exactly where you were.
In my city, right.
In your city. So we'll talk about that in the next segment. I'm Lydia, and I am with
Alex.
And we'll be right back.